Hello everybody, now welcome back to JIC Online. For today, again, we'll be continuing with our IELTS writing classes. And for today, we're going to be handling task 1, but more specifically, the line graph. Now, before we go to the line graph, let me just give you more information about what will happen with the writing test. As in the real test, they will be giving you different forms. They'll be putting it on top of your table for every single candidate, in which you are not supposed to touch nor hold, because again, you have to wait for everybody's instruction. So what will happen there is, on the instruction, it will say that you should not be turning the page or opening the question files, or basically rather the question paper. And if you follow the instruction, it will also tell you and remind you that you'll be doing task 1, which requires 150 words, and task 2, which requires 250 words, and that the whole test will be for 1 hour. Now, let me remind you, for task 1, it is highly recommended that you finish the test in 20 minutes, while task 2 is 40 minutes, because again, task 2 basically is 2/3 of your score. But anyways, let's go back to the line graph, alright? Now, before I will show you the line graph, we have to first set objectives on the things that we will be learning today. Of course, we will have to first analyze the paragraph, and then I will be teaching you how to create an overview, how to paraphrase, and complete the first paragraph. So are you ready? Now let's look at the line graph. So this is the line graph that we will be analyzing and learning from today. So first thing that you'll see at the very top, it says that the graph below shows the differences in wheat exports over 3 different areas. And the instruction goes, write a report for a university lecturer describing the information shown below. Now, again, I have to remind you, and I have to be strict, that you have to write at least 150 words. But of course, we would recommend for you to write around 175 to 190 words to avoid any underlength or getting a certain penalty. Now, what do we have to do with this line graph? The first thing, of course, we have to learn how to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where it is relevant. Now, let's look at the line graph in more details. The title reads, Wheat Exports 1985 to 1990 Millions of Tons. You'll actually see this at the very top of the line graph. If we look at the x-axis, it shows the time, 1985 to 1990, and it basically goes up a year by 1. Now, if you go to the y-axis, it shows you 0, 5, 10, and all the way up to 30 in millions of tons, but it will only show you the first 2 digits, 0 up to 30. Okay, so this is the first thing we have to look at, is the x and y axis, and then we will have to go within the line graph. So what do we have to pay attention of? Of course, of the legend. As of now, there is 3 different groups. We have the blue, which is Australia, red, which is Canada, and green, which is European Community. Let's look at the model answer and let's read the first paragraph, or rather, let's start with the first sentence. The 3 graphs of wheat exports each show a quite different pattern between 1985 and 1990. Now, if you can see, they didn't basically copy the top, which says wheat exports 1985 to 1990 in millions of tons. It basically created a sentence so that the reader will have an easier time for them to actually read and understand it. Now let's go on to the overview, which is basically the second sentence. Let's read it together. Exports from Australia declined over the 5 years period, while the Canadian market fluctuated considerably and the European Community showed an increase. So basically, the overview is that simple. So the last paragraph or paragraphs will show you the details, the trends and comparisons, figures and time. Now, let's go back to the first paragraph in which we just read. What we have to understand is, what is paraphrasing? Paraphrasing is writing a phrase or sentence in a different manner while keeping the same meaning or thoughts. This is a skill which is quite essential for us in terms of writing and speaking, but we can also apply or need to apply this in listening and reading. So, what is paraphrasing? Actually, there are several ways for us to actually paraphrase. The easiest one is synonyms. So now that you've seen a line graph and a model answer, we have to again go to the first paragraph, and basically we will be learning paraphrasing. So what is paraphrasing? Paraphrasing is the ability to write the phrase or a sentence while keeping its meaning and its thought. You just have to do it in a different kind of way without copying or parroting what is basically said, or in this case, written. So what is the easiest way to paraphrase? I'll be teaching you that in a few. The easiest way for us to paraphrase, of course, is synonym, in which I would encourage this to all of the basic students. All right? Now let's go back to the line graph. All right, now that we're back onto the line graph, I do not want you to look at the line graph, but rather I want you to go to the first sentence that you see on top. Now let's read that one more time. The graph below shows the differences in wheat exports over 3 different areas. So what are the words that we can actually use for synonyms? First is graph. So what is a synonym of graph? We can use words such as chart, illustration, or even line graph. But of course, ladies and gents, you can still find more synonyms if you can. Now let's look at this word show. We can use present, illustrate, give, and elucidate. Again, you can look for more synonyms. Now, if you look at the last word, it is areas. We can use or replace it to or by region. Now remember, synonyms are great, but you have to be very careful because sometimes the synonyms are not the proper words to use. At the same time, you also have to look at the grammar. Now, there's another way for us to paraphrase, and that is changing the word order. Now, I'm going to be showing you a different question. Let's look at this. In this question, it says the graph shows underground station passenger numbers in London. Now we can change the order by something like this. The graph shows the number of passengers in London Underground Station. Now let's say we would change some words by using synonyms and applying the changing of the word order, then we can come up with something like this. The illustration gives the number of commuters in London Underground Station. Now that's also another way for us to do so, but it's actually a higher way to do, because again, we change the order and then we applied synonyms for the different words. Now we did this with another type of question, or rather a different question. Let's try to do this with our previous question. Now let's take this into more focus. It says here, wheat exports. This can be changed to exports of wheat. That's just one way for us to actually change the word order. Moving on, we can also change the word forms, meaning to say that we can change a noun to a verb or a verb to a noun, and or change an adjective to an adverb and vice versa. To illustrate, let's look at the word different here in the first sentence. We can change it into an adjective and come up with the different exports of wheat. Now, the fourth way for us to paraphrase is to change the tone from active to passive. Now, let's try this with the same sentence that we were using, but let's incorporate everything that we've learned, okay? Now, let's go back to the question. Now, let's try to do this in another way. Let's look at the topic as is, and let's paraphrase it in another way. This is going to be a little bit longer, but at the same time with a better score. Let's read it. The provided line graph illustrates the different exports of wheat in Australia, Canada, and European community from 1985 to 1990. So that was just 4 different ways for us to paraphrase. There are actually other ways for you to paraphrase, but we will start with these 4 skills. Now, always remember, when you paraphrase, you can use synonyms, but it has to be the proper synonyms where it does not change its thought. Remember, to paraphrase is the way for you to write a passage or basically a phrase or even a sentence in a different way where you're still using the proper and same ideas as what you are intended to say. Now, at the same time, always remember, when you are paraphrasing, to always be grammatically correct. All right? Now that we've learned how to paraphrase and create an overview, I'm going to be giving you an assignment. Now, if you look to my left, there is basically going to be a sentence for you to look at in which, as your homework, I would want you to paraphrase this. All right? You'll be using this in your classroom tomorrow or later on. All right? Thank you very much and enjoy the lecture.